to episode 2. We've got a working title for now. I think I'm going to run it with the illustrated angle. I don't know if that's going to work, but the illustrated angle being my viewpoint, my angle on things, how I look at things. I don't know if I like it or not, to be honest, but for now it's the working title for these little podcasty car casts. I don't know what I'm going to call it, whatever it is. Me chatting at the camera for a period of time. So this is episode number 2. What I want to do today, I want to try and focus a little bit more in on what I'm talking about, rather than just rambling about me and my daily exploits. What I want to talk about is eels, and I want to talk about eel fishing and what it is to me, and my impression of eel fishing as a whole within the UK scene, etc, etc. So I'm going to introduce you slightly into my background to eel fishing and how I became somewhat obsessed by it. Not even so much the eel fishing, but more the eel itself. So the first eel of any size that I can remember catching, I was on holiday with family at Butlins in Minehead, and the cabin we had, or lodge, or whatever you want to call it, chalet, had like a boating lake out the back of the accommodation, and I brought some very, very mediocre fishing equipment with me. It was if I remember rightly, it was a kit that I'd got from Argos as a kid, as a little one, you know. I always struggle to remember the name of the brand, but I think it was called Steadfast, which I don't think exists anymore. It was just a little budget brand. I think it might have been an exclusive to Argos sort of thing, and then they disappeared. So I took that kit with me. I remember very distinctly. I had like a tip rod and a little reel. It was purple, the reel, purple with a black handle. It's stuck in my brain very vividly. And I was essentially just fishing feeders, feeders with sweet corn on the hook. And the fishing was quite good. I'd caught quite a few, sort of, at the time as a kid, some sort of reasonable sized breams, sort of 2 to 3 pound. And then I remember, like I said, so vividly, it's just started raining. So in 3 casts, I'd had one reasonable bream, about 3 pounds. The second cast, I'd had a grass carp, which I'd never caught before, about 7 or 8 pound. And I was incredibly pleased with that. And the cast after that, again, remind you, on sweet corn on a feeder rod, I had an eel. Now, a little bit of sea fishing I'd done at that point. I'd caught tiny little, what we call bootlaces, which, are the baby version of the bigger ones we now target, because the ones we have in the sea here, aside from congers, are the same species as the ones we get in the lakes. Exactly the same fish, just adapted to different salinities. Anyway, so I'd had this eel, and I was absolutely amazed by it, because it was such a strange creature, and it fought so much harder than the 7 pound grass carp, and it just impressed me. Now, being a kid, you hear rumours about, I've always been interested in fishing, and you hear rumours of what you're meant to do with fish. And I remember one of the old boys I'd known, or maybe my granddad, I forget now, had said the best way to hold an eel was with a sheet of newspaper. Not being educated in the way of fish care that we are now, that's what I did. And somewhere, I'll try and dig it out at some point, there's a photo of me crouching down in the back garden of this chalet in Minehead, in Butlins, holding an eel with newspaper. It was probably maybe 2.5 pounds looking back, probably not much bigger than that, but that was my first experience of catching an eel and being infatuated by it and really super intrigued. So that is probably where the seeds were planted. And then following on from that, I remember I've always been an all-rounder, so I've always fished for everything, and quite seasonally. Back then my summers were taken up fishing for tench and bream and carp and crucians and that sort of thing. And come winter, it was pike fishing predominantly, or even at the time the cod fishing was very good in the estuary in the Thames, so we used to do quite a bit of cod fishing from the boats. So I spent my time bouncing around, and I'd never at that point purposely gone out targeting eels. I'd caught, since that first one in Butlins, I'd caught others by mistake, but that was it. One of the local carp lakes to where I live, I started hearing whispers of big eels, not just eels, big eels getting caught by carp anglers. And I remember seeing a photo of one of the lads over there who was, again, we wasn't educated in fish care at all, you know, I wasn't, so I didn't know there was anything wrong in it. But there was a carp angler who caught an eel, didn't want to touch it because most carp anglers don't, and he was holding the fish up by the rig, so he had the rig. And I remember distinctly the fish's head was in line with like the lower part of his ear, jaw, and the fish was as long as he was tall. He wasn't a short lad, and it was a massive, massive, massive fish, and that really, really piqued my interest. So, and the lake wasn't somewhere you could just turn up and do nights. It was members only. It was a day ticket lake during the day, members only at night. So I was very new. They didn't know me. There was no chance of me getting a membership ticket or anything like that. So my only options was to go and fish the days. Now, nowadays I do zero eel fishing in daylight hours. I'm absolutely positive it will still work, but just the way it works around my lifestyle, I just don't do it. Anyway, so I decided I was going to go fish this lake in days, and the amount of eels in this particular venue was unbelievable. Having 25 to 30 fish in a day session wasn't unheard of, and they wasn't really small eels, don't get me wrong, they wasn't monsters, but a 3 pounder or 3.5 pounder or even a 4 pounder was quite usual. It wasn't unusual at all, so it wasn't unheard of to go for a day session and have 20 eels, 25 eels, and one of them be a 4 pounder. Now this really gave me, the amount of fish I was catching really gave me an opportunity to start refining rigs and working out what I liked and what I didn't like, and why I liked it and why I didn't like things. Now, generally in eel fishing, there's variations on this, but there's two methods of, or there's two styles of bait you fish with. Generally you fish with either a dead bait or a fish bait of some description, or you fish with worms. Obviously other people do some other things, some people fish with prawns and other things, but they're the two most popular. A dead bait or a fish bait, be it live or dead, and worm. I never really was attracted to fishing worm. I felt it was too general. There was too many opportunities for other species I wasn't really interested in catching to pick them up. Be it carp, be it tench, be it bream, be it roach, whatever. I felt like it wasn't a bait I could leave out for any amount of time. So I immediately was fishing dead baits. Started off fishing quite big dead baits, if I remember rightly. You know, sort of maybe 3-inch, which is just my naivety. Going back, thinking on it now, that was just what I thought a small pike bait was. So I figured, oh, well, that must be roughly what you would fish for an eel. Nowadays, I'm fishing tiny little sub 1-inch sections of roach or rudd as bait. But yeah, so I was fishing quite big dead baits. Then I started missing a lot of runs, which, as you come to learn with eel fishing, it's just part of the parcel. You do miss takes. They grab baits, they pull at them, they run off with them, they drop them, or they haven't got the hook in the mouth when you go to set the hook. So that was that. So then I started scaling down and refining, and started messing with my rigs a little bit. You know, initially I was just using a running rigs with the lead on the line, and you know, a rig. From memory, I think I was pretty much using a similar rigs as I was using to carp, my carp fishing. I might have even been hair rigging the baits because I was sort of experimenting with that with my pike fishing at the time with single hooks. I had a couple of venues that wouldn't allow trebles. But so that was that. Then I started bringing my bait size down, refining everything a little bit, and I started looking at rigs. I started doing some reading online about what was the done way of doing things, and started playing around with what is now known as the Dyson rig. And so the Dyson rig is basically utilising a subflow which allows you to present a bait up off the bottom. Now, for me, in my mind, that made sense because anything that's on the bottom, there's possibilities of that becoming fouled by silt and leaves and twigs and weed and whatever else. So I liked the idea of my bait being more accessible. And when you look at the anatomy of an eel, their eyes are closer to the top of their head than they are anywhere else. So it made sense that they would be feeding looking up a lot of the time, especially the fact if you see these eels that almost live in burrows. So they're on the bottom or near the bottom quite a lot. So a lot of what they're doing is looking up. So that's why that's when I really started using the Dyson rig quite a lot. And it done me really well. I caught a lot of fish. I lost a very, very, very big fish from that water. Where we used to get the bites was very close to an island, and I remember getting a run and hooking the fish, and it instantly snagged me up. It didn't happen very often, and I used quite heavy gear when I'm eel fishing, even back then, because I'd come from pike fishing and knew that I didn't want to leave a rig in the water alive because it was potentially dead fish. So I used to fish with quite heavy gear then. I fish with even heavier gear now. But anyway, so this fish put me in a snag, and I thought, well, I'm just going to hold it and hope it comes. I wasn't going to try and pull for a break or anything like that. And so, right, sorry, equipment packed up again there. So anyway, as I was saying, I didn't want to pull for a break, but I kept steady pressure, and eventually something gave, and I started getting my rig back. But there was no fight, and I was pretty sure I just pulled out a snag and the fish was gone. So I'm retrieving, and eventually I see exactly what I expect to see. I saw a branch coming out of the water, covered in slop and slime and everything else. So I'm retrieving it, and I'm just pulling this in, hammering it. And it wasn't until I had it 2/3 of the way out of the water, I saw that my line wrapped around it, followed it down to my rig, and saw that the rig was still attached to the eel that I initially got the take from. Now, obviously, at this point, I can only see the head and maybe the first foot of this fish, but this thing was enormous. It was huge. It made my knees go to jelly. I didn't know what to do. All I was trying to do then was trying to pile this branch and the fish, which I couldn't see 4/5 of it, pile it into my net. And of course, because I'd been hoofing it in and it had been wrapped around a branch, it got slack. I always fish barbless hooks with eels. It got loose, and it literally, I watched it all happen in slow motion. I watched the hook come out of its lip, I watched it sit there for a second, and the way eels do, it just went backwards like that and disappeared, never to be seen again. So that was my first experience with a very big eel. Now, how big was it? I don't know. I wouldn't like to put a weight on it. Having seen some very, very big eels recently, one in particular, which we'll get onto in a second, this fish was close to that, if it wasn't bigger. It was in and around that area. It was a huge fish, but that's besides the point. That's what really, seeing that fish after catching however many I caught from that lake over the period of time I was fishing there, it gave me inspiration to carry on fishing, trying to catch one big one. And that's what I did. Over the next decade or so, I didn't do loads of eel fishing because, like I said, I'm one of these guys that jumps from species to species depending on the season. So I do a few nights a year, or for a couple of months I'd be seriously on my eel fishing, and then I'd move on to something else. And I caught some nice fish. I caught a lot of fours, upper fours, and then more recently, a couple of years ago, I caught, which is still my PB, which is £5.12, which is an absolutely huge fish. And to see a £5.12 eel in the flesh is quite an impressive thing. 4 ounces of a £6. It's a huge fish. I'm still incredibly pleased with that PB. So that was that. And then since then, been catching more fish. Nothing anywhere near as impressive as that, but been catching more fish. Excuse me, my nose is running. So fast forward to a bit more recently, because there's not been anything that amazing happened in my eel fishing since that 512. Last year, there was a charity auction run by a guy called Jerry Gleason, who does it occasionally. He takes a lot of his own time and spends a lot of his own time and effort into helping people who need a little bit of help. So in this particular occasion, it was a young girl who wasn't very well. The family needed to raise some money to help with her treatment. I think she was having to go abroad for certain things or something along those lines. Anyway, I like to help where I can, and I can't do a lot because I am a busy man, and I haven't got mountains and mountains of money to give away. But what I have got is my time, and I am generally okay to share my time, especially for a good cause. So I contacted Jerry and I said, put me down for a night's guided eel fishing on this. He was running an auction, so it's a charity auction. Anglers and whoever else would donate something, and people would bid on it, and the funds would then go to the family of this young girl. So we done that. I gave him the auction. The guy who won it contacted me pretty much straight away. This is in September of last year. Excuse me, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. And I said, look, let's hold off. Let's not rush out and do something right now because it's not a particularly good time of year to fish for eels. Let's wait. Let's do it next year. I'll be able to hopefully show you a bit more and actually physically catch an eel for you to see how it works. I can show you the unhooking process, etc., etc., and give you the full experience rather than just going now just for the sake of it and you're not really going to get the full worth of it. So fast forward from September all the way round to the end of May, which is my favourite time to be fishing for eels. I do like a bit of early season, April-ish, but for real good chances of catching a big fish, I think is May. Last couple of weeks in May, first week in June. Generally you get those sort of warm, humidy, almost like stormy type of nights, and that's my favourite time to be fishing for eels. So anyway, we get to the chosen venue and I run through with the guy, Mickey. I run through with him how I target eels, and by this point, fast forward from where I was fishing on the little local carp lake, I have adapted how I fish for a slightly size. Everything I've simplified. I found with eels you can overcomplicate things, you can overthink it, and your hookup ratio suffers. So now all I fish is a very, very simple running rig, going back to basically what I started with. The only difference is I fish a short boom off my lead with a little poly ball and the run ring below. I actually think it's the heat that's franking my camera out, so every time I keep switching off I think it's the camera saying I need to cool down for a second. So I'm having to sort of take breaks in between the filming. So anyway, as I was saying, I fish a running rig with a short boom off the lead with a little poly ball on top, just to make sure everything keeps out of any snot or horribleness that's on the bottom. And I fish quite a short rig, which is different how I used to fish it. I used to fish quite a long rig because I was convinced eels were quite wary of being anywhere near leads and things like that. But I fish maybe, I don't know, 4 inches, something like that, 4.5. And what I have started doing with absolutely all my rigs when it comes to eel fishing, started fishing the twig rig arrangement. So with a twig rig, you essentially fish something stiff just behind your hook on the rig. What that does is it stops the eels deep hooking, so that as they take the bait in, if they can keep chewing and swallowing and not feel anything, they will do, and you'll end up deep hooking them. With this, they take it into their mouth, the hook goes to they try to keep chewing, they feel the hardness of whatever you're using as your twig, and there are setups online and visuals for you to go and look at, so just Google twig rig for eels. They stop, they run. And what I found is I get these really, really, really positive runs since using this twig rig. They absolutely belt off and there's no missing them because the hook is exactly where you want it to be, in that front part of the mouth. Hooking area changes. Most of the time it's actually in the centre of the bottom lip, which is not really what I expect it to be. I expect it to be at the top, but most times it's in the centre of the bottom lip. But anyway, so that's that. And then for an actual hook link material, this is a bit of a controversial one, because I know a lot of people advocate for the use of wire. With eels, I don't feel like there's any need. I've never lost an eel to being bitten off. I've caught hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of eels in my time. I've never even really felt rubbed. You know, maybe I'm fishing places with the eels that don't really have these super sharp teeth. But for me, in my fishing, I do use quite a heavy material. I use 85-pound ton up, which is made by Christen, and that is, for me, if it's good for catfish, which is what it's been built for, it's fine for eels. So that's what I use. And then the most important part of eel fishing for me is the bite indication. Now I use a front alarm, but something with a vibration sensitivity. So a Delkim, or what I use are the old Ace alarms. They're brilliant alarms. You can switch between a roller wheel and the vibration sensitivity. And they're my absolute favourite alarm I own, especially for eel fishing. And then at the rear, I like to fish with an open bay alarm on my reel, and then a rollover indicator rather than a drop off. What I tend to get with that is you roll over, if you get a tape, will start to lift and you'll hear the ball bearing inside. Again, if you don't know what a rollover is, Google Zandavan rollover, Zandavan, I think, rollover. It's a type of indicator that's specifically built for eel fishing or for fish that are sensitive to resistance, so zander, etc., and things like that. But yeah, as the rollover starts, did you hear the ball bearing going? And usually I'm so on it with the rods with eel fishing, I'm there before that rollover's hit the top, and I knock it back, and instantly that fish then has got free running line off the open bail arm, and there feels absolutely no resistance. So that was that. So anyway, we run through all the setup when I was fishing with this fella, and we get it all out. We get 2 rods out. 45 minutes from them being out, we get a take on the left-hand rod, and he has his fish on, and he's not convinced it's a big fish. Now, I do fish with heavy gear for real, so I've got 3.5 pound test curve rods, 10 foot, and I've got 65 pound braid. That sounds like overkill, but I promise you, the time that you will need that heavy gear is when you hook a very big fish near some snags, and you will not want to be fishing with light gear. So, although it may spoil the fight with smaller fish, I'd rather have the extra beef there when I need it. And that was the night we needed it. So he's bullying this fish quite heavy. So he's bullying this fish, he's really giving it a bit of welly, and he's not convinced it's a big fish, and he's come up to the surface quite quickly. And eels do that sometimes. They come up, they thrash around on the surface, make a lot of noise, but they haven't got the water resistance to then really pull back. Now, it was a very bright night, there was a big moon that night, and I could sort of see the fish, and I could see it was a reasonable fish, but I obviously couldn't see how big it was at this point. It then dove, which is unusual for an eel. They don't usually dive back down. Once they're up to the surface, you can, even a big one with heavy gear, you can generally pretty much skim them in. The fish dove, and as it did it, it stripped a load of line off the reel. Now, fight's over, fish is in the net. We've eventually scooped it up, and with my eel fishing, I like to use a very long net, not wide, but long. So from the handle to the front of the net is very long, and the Corum folding spoon nets, yeah, have a look at them if you've got one in your local tackle shop, because they're brilliant shape for it. They're not very wide, but they're very long, quite heavy, so you need quite a beefy handle, but they're brilliant nets for that sort of thing. Anyway, got the fish in there. I've looked at it, I thought, cool, actually that's quite a big fish. I thought 4.5, maybe even 5, had no idea really. So I've set what I do, left the fish to rest in the net, set the mat up, got the scales zeroed and the sling wet and all that sort of thing. Went to lift the fish out of the net, it already unhooked itself in the net, so it just goes to show how lightly it was hooked. And as I lifted the net, I thought, actually, bloody hell, that's a really big fish. That's definitely over 5, maybe even knocking on the door of 6, which is just an incredible fish, and would have been, you know, I'm thinking, Christ, this guy's been fishing for 45 minutes and he's going to beat my PB. Little did I know. Got the fish on the net, on the mat, lifted it out of the net, and that's when I really felt the weight and the girth. The fish was so wide around the middle. We got it out, we put it on the sling, we weighed it, and as I lifted the scales, I just kept going, and I was like, nah. I'm looking down, seeing if the sling was caught on something, and the scales settled and locked at 8 pound and 1 ounces. Now, I knew that 8 pound and 1 ounce is the fish, not a fish of a lifetime, the fish of 10 lifetimes. People fish their entire life and don't get anywhere close to catching an 8 pounder. And this guy's been fishing for eels for 45 minutes and he's got an 8 pounder. So we're blown away, and I'm like, no, that can't be right. He got a set of scales out that he had. We zeroed the sling again while the fish is resting in there. Weighed them again, 8 pound 1 ounce. Now, I'm absolutely blown away, so I've weighed them again. We put the fish back in the net, and I've just taken a second just to centre myself, just to calm down, let the adrenaline die off a little bit, and just really consider what we're doing and make sure we're doing everything right. So, yeah, we did all that, we let it rest, I got it back out the net, and we re-weighed it again, 8 pound 1. On 2 sets of scales, it was 8 pound 1. I've since checked my scales against something I knew the weight of, and they're absolutely spot on, so 8 pound 1. And so I was trying to explain to Mickey that this is an incredibly special fish. One of the biggest eels caught by design in my living memory. You know, there's not many 8 pounders caught every year. Right, yes, apologies for the cuts, guys. My camera does not like the heating here. Obviously, I've got the windows done up because otherwise all you'd hear is car noise. And I've got the aircon turned off, so again, just to reduce the background noise. My camera does not like it, it keeps overheating. So anyway, yeah, so we've got the fish in the net. I'm trying to explain to Mickey what an incredible fish this is. We're trying to take some photos. I was not ready for it. I was not prepared for taking photos of such a huge fish. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to retain the fish all night, because it was quite early in the night. Sometimes if it's a little bit later on, I've only got to wait an hour or two, I would sack an eel, but not for the entirety of the night. So got the photos done, I've released the fish, I watched it go back, and I was absolutely amazed. And we basically sat in awe for a good hour. I was visibly shaking, where I was so full of adrenaline about this fish, which I don't think I've ever been like that about a fish before. I've caught some big fish of not monstrous fish, but some big fish of most species, but that will always go down as one of the most special fish I've witnessed, let alone been a part of catching. So anyway, that was that. And what happened with that is it really reignited me for my eel fishing. It got me passionate about it again, made me really want to put some effort back in. And then obviously, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't half hoping that if I fished this lake enough, I would catch that fish again, and that this time would be my fish, and I could add an 8-pound eel to my CV, which would be incredible. So I went and fished, and I fished with a friend of mine, Matt, who has his own YouTube channel. I'll link it down below. Fanta Fishing. A lot of you would already watch his videos, I'm sure. So we went and had a little social, and I had one run, one fish, and I had a 5-pound 8, which again is I haven't seen an 8-pounder. It's sort of, I've got to be careful that I don't move my goalposts. A 5-pounder is a massive fish, and it's only 4 ounces off of my PB, which is incredible. So yeah, that was that. Matt had a carp on a dead bait, which happens quite often, more often than people would expect. He got some lovely photos for me, which I was really pleased about. And yeah, that was it. And that sort of takes me up to now. That was only maybe a week ago, something like that. And I've got some intentions of doing some more eel fishing. I've just got to cram it in around my busy life. I've got an interesting thing I'm working on that I don't want to talk about too much yet, but it's about how I'm actually baiting my hook for eel fishing. I've seen a lot of ways people have done it over the years, hair rigs and armour mesh and things like that. The way I'm doing it is quite simple, but I've not seen anyone do it before. So I'm going to keep it quiet just for the time being, just because it's something I'm still sort of tweaking and refining. I'm not sure whether it's going to be, whether it works perfectly yet, but since I've been doing it, I started doing it, strangely, the night of the 8-pounder. So since that time, I've had 2 runs. The 8-pounder, which came unhooked in the net, which meant it was hooked somewhere near the front of the mouth, which is exactly where you want to hook eels. And then the 5-pound 8, which was hooked squarely about half a centimetre back in the bottom of the lip, absolutely exactly where you want it. Doesn't do any damage to the fish, very, very easy to unhook. So at the moment it's doing what I want it to do, but I'm going to keep that a little bit quiet for now, just because I want to work on it and refine it. If I feel like it's going to really benefit eel fishing as a whole and will help people not deep hook fish or damage eels, then I will tell everyone. But I want to play with it a little bit for myself first, just to make sure I've got my theory in my head is actually working, and then I'll share it with the wider community. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say on eel fishing. I would really recommend you, if you've never fished for eels, go out and do it. Do a bit of reading first. Make sure you're doing it safely. They're very, very sensitive fish. A deep hooked eel can be fatal. So anywhere behind the back of the mouth, so if you look at where their head stops, if you like, and their body starts, a lot of their vital organs are back there. So a deep hooked fish can be quite damaging, and especially digging around with forceps and disc just trying to unhook them. So if you are going to fish with eels, have a look at the twig rig. It's very, very effective at stopping deep hooked fish. Barbless hooks are an absolute must, because eels, even if you do deep hook them, the best thing you can probably do for an eel is cut the rig as close as you can to the hook as you can. With a barbless hook, eels are quite good at getting rid of it by themselves. As soon as you start digging around with forceps and disgorgers and things, you can start causing more damage than anything else. So you're better off there at that point, cutting the hook, letting the eel get rid of the hook by itself. So yeah, if you've got a friend that's into eel fishing, go ask them to take you fishing. They're not going to take you to the secret lakes. Eel fishermen are one of the most secretive types of anglers you'll ever come across. but they will help you. They want you to fish for eels safely. So talk to an eel angler, get out and give it a go. They're very, very, very impressive fish. Do a little bit of reading on the life cycle of an eel. All of it, or pretty much all of it, is theory. We don't actually know that much about European eel. It's very interesting. Go and do some reading. I hope you enjoyed this, another illustrated angle, which is what looks like I'm calling it, unless I come up with something better. Yeah, any suggestions on what you want to hear me talk about next? I've rambled on this one for ages. I've overheated my camera about 15 times. It's going to be chopped up into about 15 different pieces, so apologies if this is a little bit jumpy. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.